Guard of the Republic Radio Show with your co-hosts Mike Tuman and Paul Burvid every Saturday noon to 1. Today another bonus hour, noon to 2. And WRMN 1410 AM. You can go to WRMN1410am.com and you can stream the show if you can't pick up 1410 AM from where you are. We're also streaming live on WRMN 1410's YouTube live channel. So the call in here is 847-931-1410, and the text is 505-926-1410. You could also comment on the YouTube live. So we get let me give a call out to some of our loyal listeners. I know there's always Brandon out there. Then there's our Cleveland Dennis, and then there's my cousin Janine. She's a loyal listener, and my friend Gary. He's another loyal listener that I know of. Hopefully, some of my friends and everyone out there is listening to us. Hey, Paul.
How are you?
It's kind of dark there. It's yeah. All right. You come. Yeah, much better. Much better. All right. So today. Okay, I got to mention, if you want to join the Legion Post in Schiller Park, it's Post 104 at Schiller Park. Check out our webpage, post104.com. So, Paul, I like how we keep things topical. We're going to talk a little bit about Space Force, NASA, and SpaceX. And there's been a little controversy with that. Have you heard about it?
Oh, there sure has. What's happening is, since the bromance allegedly may or may not have ended between the president and the world's most chief billionaire, what's kind of interesting, and our co-host today, Marla, brought this up several times. Why are we relying on only two companies?
SpaceX and
why are we just relying on NASA and SpaceX? And that's kind of the reason. It's interesting because since SpaceX started in 2002, they're the chief launch vehicle, bar none, from any country or private entity. They've launched more satellites and operations into space, 500 missions, and yesterday was their 50th mission of this year alone, launching the Starlink. And they launched it from Space Force Base Canaveral, and they put up some satellites yesterday. And Elon Musk has a 42% equity share in SpaceX, but he's got almost 80% control of voting. So they've got 13,000 employees, and they've relocated recently from California to Texas.
Yeah, so they say you build a better mousetrap or a cheaper mousetrap, and people will come to you. So as a private enterprise, to make money, of course, he developed a launching system, a rocket system. Now, and he produced them. The big difference between the rockets that NASA launches, right, the main ones that everyone knows about, and the ones that Elon is most often launching, that he started out launching, were unmanned. They just throw a satellite up there, and hopefully it gets in the right place, or you get it high enough, and then it deploys, and you can control it from the Earth to get it into the right orbit. Whereas NASA, we put up a few satellites, and then we put men into space. We put human beings up there. And of course, it took him a while before he had humans, actual human missions. And so when you get we have NASA is a U.S. government agency, all right? So it's not a private company, right? And they rely on SpaceX now. But if they didn't need to rely on SpaceX, then they would be producing rockets. The difference is that they don't have in most government things, they don't have a, I said I won't say again. They don't have an incentive to do things cheaper, more inexpensive. And brings back something that my mother said. If it's a problem you could throw money at, it's not a problem. I think that's what the government does, is they throw money at problems rather than throw thought and effort into it. They just throw more money at it, and it goes over budget, and it's a lot of money spent. If someone could do that more efficiently and come in, then they're going to make some money off of it, and they're going to make some profit. So when you're talking about that profit, if they're doing it more efficiently and NASA's saving money now, well, you can cut their budget because they have a limited scope of what they're launching into space. It's, how many satellites need to be up there at once? The newer satellites do more, so the older satellites did less. The newer satellite's going to have longer battery life, longer component life, and they do more. So you have to replace them less often. So if you're not, I'm getting to say that I think one of the problems here is that being the major, one of the major contractors to NASA and to Space Force, when Elon Musk saw that his Space Force, the budget to Space Force and the budget to NASA were being cut, that affects his bottom line.
Well, there's another factor, two other factors. Musk has been really in the forefront of reusable space boosters. And that cuts because with NASA, you build them and you ditch them in the ocean and they sink to the bottom. And they started reclaiming the boosters on the shuttles, but then of course, the shuttle exploded and things like that. But SpaceX is able to pinpoint land the boosters, and I find this incredible because you have to go faster than about 18,000 miles an hour to go into low Earth orbit. That's to escape the Earth's gravity, and he's able to do that, and yet still have enough fuel to land the boosters right on a pinpoint spot. And he's able to do that because he invested a lot of money in design and in thought and in people, which NASA doesn't do. The Saturn V was the greatest rocket of all time for almost 50 years, right? And they don't even have the plans to recreate that because it's gone. But Musk took that one further, and he's able to land the rockets back and reuse them. There's one, his rockets have been reused over 450 times, and he's doing 1 to 3 launches a week. I mean, they just had a launch yesterday where I was watching it, and it launched like, I think, 20 satellites, and they launched it yesterday, and he does that 3-4 times a week now. NASA in no way could do that. And it's because of the private money, the private innovation, the incentives. But my question, and the same one that Marla has, why are we only relying on two major entities? I mean, NASA, they had all the research, they had the Air Force, they had the German guys from Operation Paperclip, but they didn't expand on it, and yet a private company is able to do that. And a lot of people don't know this, but, and this gets lost in the weeds. Just this week, on May the 29th, there's a company called Starfighters International, and they're based, I believe, in Texas, okay? And all of a sudden, they purchased 12 F-4 Phantoms. Now, I don't think any country right now uses an F-4 Phantom.
It's kind of old technology.
Right. It was the most popular jet, though, for a long time. There were over 5,000 made. The U.S. used them, Greece used them, England used them, Iran used them, Israel used them, but they're buying them. And why are they buying them? They're attaching satellites to them. And they're going to be launching low Earth orbit satellites because that jet, they're using F-104s right now, which are about 70 years old, but they're not going into orbit. But they are going to go into orbit with these F-4 Phantoms, and they're going to be launching payloads and packages commercially. I mean, and we know this works because over 30 years ago, a U.S. Air Force pilot in a test used a Hunter killer rocket from an F-15 to launch and destroy an old American satellite. So we know this technology's worked for over 30 years, but we don't do it. It requires and using a platform that's almost 70 years old. Why aren't we doing that?
Okay.
Why aren't we doing it?
Again, there's no motivation for innovation. There's no motivation for cost-saving methods. Unless you told someone at NASA that every dollar over budget comes out of your paycheck, right? That every dollar this project goes over budget, we're going to cut the paychecks of everyone associated to that project, so that you're not, you're incentivized to do it in the most efficient way possible. But safety's got to be in place. Yes, but NASA is the government, which is a lot of people from the military, the Air Force and everything, and your astronauts coming out of the Air Force. And one of the big problems in the military at the highest level is that's the way we've always done it. The innovation isn't there. If it works, don't change it. If there's an easier way to do something, don't change it, because this is the way we've always done it. So yes, I talk about in my book Monkeys in Space, which was my dive into the world of science fiction. I don't think anything in it is really science fiction. I think the technology's there to make this stuff happen. And one of the things is that rather than launch people in a rocket that has high G's and uses an extreme amount of, you're on a bomb, all right? You're riding a bomb into space, right? Why can't you take a B-52 or a 747 or an extremely high flying, even the Concorde, right? The jet there, all right? The supersonic jet. Get it up into as high altitude as you can and then launch from on top of that. All right, they carried a space shuttle on top of a 747.
Well, they launched the X-15s that way 70 years ago.
Yeah, so why aren't we doing it now? Because
that's what I mean. It's a technology generally that the military, Space Force, Air Force, whatever, NASA pioneered, and then they just abandon it. They just abandon it, and then they leave it to private companies. I think you're right. It is that you throw enough money at it, but with them, I think we've been there, done that. No more records to make, and then see what somebody else does with it.
And then so NASA, again, it's a government agency. So if they went into the business of space travel, right, putting the citizens into space, they traveled them to the moon or whatever, the Citizens Travel Agency. Look how well the government runs Amtrak. It's totally subsidized. Amtrak is a money-losing operation, completely money-losing for the government. It makes no money, but they keep it on the East Coast. And the main reason it's on the East Coast, not because people are afraid to fly, is because it's so convenient for everyone in Virginia and in D.C. It's convenient to have that Amtrak, but they're not paying what the actual ticket would cost them. They're paying a subsidized fee. It's the government getting into helping private people do something. Imagine if the U.S. Air Force, if there was no Delta Airlines, there's no American Airlines, there was no any of them.
United?
No Southwest, no United. It was all run by the Air Force. And everyone had to buy a ticket through the Air Force and fly via Air Force tickets. Right? Imagine that. Right? The government trying to run private travel like that. They're barely capable of doing air traffic control. Barely. They're on the edge of failure every day. They haven't updated. They haven't spent the money. This is if it's good enough, why fix it? You know, we could spend money on other things. They have a budget, and if something doesn't break, don't fix it. But it's going to break. It only has a shelf life. So when they do something, if they're not constantly using that technology like Elon Musk does, because he's making money launching private satellites. If AT&T, Comcast, all these other international companies, phone companies, streaming internet stuff, had to rely on NASA to launch up their satellites, we wouldn't have the communications we have now. We wouldn't have, your cars wouldn't have tracking or anything. That would still be military because there'd only be a limited amount. So it goes down to private companies which are in the interest of making money and making things more efficient. So they can go out and, yes, so if you find, it's Darwinism, right? So some guy came up with the brilliant idea, right? Why don't we get these high-speed jets that are capable of high altitude because they're bomber interceptors, right? They're capable of extreme high altitude and speed, and they could carry a missile payload of several thousand pounds, several tons. Why couldn't they carry a small satellite with a rocket booster on there to get it up there? And the guy says, oh, let's try it. But first of all, he needs customers, right? And then he needed capital to buy those things. And unless he's if he's very rich, right, and he doesn't need capital, he could start a company without the capital. Even Elon Musk had to sell stock, right? If SpaceX was owned he has 80% voting, but he only owns 42% of the company, right? So he doesn't even own it. So he has a fiduciary responsibility to his shareholders to make money, not to lose money. If he owned it outright himself, he could do a lot of things that would be money losers in the short run, but maybe money makers in the future. Yeah, so I think that there's got to be a private organization on the side in competition with NASA, sometimes to embarrass them, or sometimes to get them out there, or sometimes to say maybe the government doesn't need to be this far into it. Because right now, the technology, NASA has government funding to do a lot of things that SpaceX won't do because there's no money in it. Space exploration, there's no money in exploration. There's money in possibly going to a asteroid and mining an asteroid. There'll be money in that, maybe, but to tell, where's the money in finding a new star 13 billion light years from here?
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
What you could do with it.
Now, one of the problems is, what happens if SpaceX no longer is available to NASA or to Space Force? If it just dissolves and says we're not going to contract with them.
That problem is imminent because the only thing. Here's what we don't understand. This goes back 15, 20 years, maybe longer. When we decided to decommission the shuttles without something in place, not even a small capsule type system, that was very short-sighted because for a long time we were relying on the Russians, okay? And now the Russians have told us, we're not hitching a ride with you because the Cold War, again, is heating up a little bit. And we had no other means to get up there other than through the Dragon capsule, which is Musk's. And what was a huge embarrassment was when Boeing sent the crew up there, and then the ship started leaking, and then they stranded their own crew for the better part of a year, for 9 months, and Musk had to go and go rescue them, and you know that's a huge embarrassment. That's an embarrassment to our general contractor industry. That's an embarrassment to a military contractor. That's an embarrassment to a partially hometown company in Chicago, Boeing, and it's an embarrassment to the nation, because you don't want your people stranded in space like we did to Laika and the monkeys. Okay, so you know, I mean, but the fact that he stepped up and he had an alternative, and it was because he had been delivering cargo and taking the trash back. So in essence, the refuse guy saved him because he went up there and got him. And he's been populating the station since about 2019 now with the Dragon crews.
Yes,
and he's actually got his own group of space people. They're astronauts. I forgot what they call them now, but he's got his own crew that he's getting ready to do his own functions with. And you know, I mean, it's you know, it's a double-edged sword, though. I mean, we need them, but this is not something that should have been brought into the public. And you know,
I think it wholeheartedly should be part of the public discourse.
Well, I mean, the fact that we're impotent in getting our people back, and the other thing is that station's coming down soon, and we didn't fund to put it back in orbit. Somebody's got to bring that thing back down.
Oh, it'll burn up.
And he had the contract for that.
Yeah, you can either take it apart and bring it back down, or you can let it burn up, or you can put a rocket on it and move it in higher orbit.
Right, and it's kind of too big just to let burn up because parts of it aren't. So I mean, they need to like get this locked down, get him to deorbit the thing, and then move on from here and get more people involved in this, because this is ridiculous. I mean, you know, it's one of the hugest parts of our budget next to the military. And we need to get on the ball with this, because this is an embarrassment. I mean, you know, you got countries like India, you know, sending stuff to the moon and everything. We need to get back on the ball and get back into a mode of to the moon by the end of the 1960s.
All right, so when we come back, we're going to be talking more about what we're going to do if Space Force if SpaceX decides to take a walk. Co-host Paul Burvitt and Mike Tuman, and we have a caller.
Hello.
Hi, welcome to the show.
Hello. Hi. And you are? Uh-oh.
All right.
Well,
We'll drop them if
they
you want
called
to
in to say hi, and then maybe they got a little. Some people get a little tongue-tied, you know, get a little performance anxiety there. I can understand. So, Paul, one of the things that I can understand SpaceX there, and they're making money, and that's great. And a lot of people don't realize what NASA, they're going to go, what have you done for me lately? Where SpaceX is going to advertise everything that they do, and because they're going to make money, they're developing a product. But one of the things that SpaceX as a U.S. business, all right, a U.S. corporation, falls under the Defense Production Act of 1950. So if we needed to continue to launch satellites as a defense thing, then the U.S. government could come in and force him to do that. Say, you will do this. Otherwise...
Well, they've already talked about that. Bannon talked about that the other day.
Yeah.
And they could force him to do that, and maybe they will. but we should be encouraging other people to be doing this too.
It's very expensive.
Well, but there's 15 other companies that are involved in this, and that have some semblance of space exploration. And like I told you, India's doing it, Israel does it, China does it, the European Space Association does it. You got other countries. We should be encouraging our own country, our own companies in our country to do this because, again, we don't want to be left on our own. It's a huge embarrassment when you can't get your people down. And, that's the greatest fear of every president. That was the fear in going to
President Biden wasn't too concerned.
He wasn't. He let him stay up there.
Yeah. So, first of all, defense contractors, you can't embarrass them. They have no shame. You have to be able to have shame to feel shame for any of these things. And they don't have any, all right? They're in it for the buck, the easiest buck to make. One of the things I got to disagree, though, is it seems like you're going towards we should have SpaceX there and then we should subsidize them. The U.S. government should subsidize that, much like Amtrak, to get them going. All right?
No, I think we should have more competition.
Oh, okay. So spread it out like AT&T when they broke them up, when they broke up Ma Bell.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I don't think that worked 100% well either, but
AT&T just bought them all up again. Just took a while.
And formed them as separate companies.
Yes, so-called separate companies.
Right.
So we got the callers back, I think.
I know who this is. Hi, Dennis.
Hey, Dennis.
Oh. Goodness.
Yep.
Hello?
Okay. I'm trying to think here. Boom, 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 boom. Let me see. No texts. So, yeah, the more competition. So right now, Elon Musk has very little competition, but it's coming up. You told me, right? So he's building these big rockets, and his main business, other than the U.S. government, is launching these satellites into space for private companies. Now, if someone could find out a more inexpensive way of doing it, because rocket engines are expensive. Rocket fuel is expensive, all right? And every time you launch, it costs millions and millions of dollars just in fuel alone, right? If you could reduce the amount of fuel needed, a more efficient way, and get it up there, then you kind of make profit, and then you have competition. Now, in order to maintain a competitive thing, the other companies are going to have to find a way to lower their costs to be more competitive, or they're going to go out of business. Or the other thing you do is, if you're a big and powerful enough company, you just quash the competition. You quash them. Oh, that's a more efficient way. They're going to make money. We're going to have to change. We're going to have to change our business model to compete with them. But I don't want to change our business model because it's been making money up until now. So what do? Well, we put them out of business. We either tort them out of business, or we do dirty tricks to them. We tort them out of business, dirty tricks. We smear them in the press or whatever, anything so that we don't have to change our business model to be competitive. And that's what's going to happen in the corporate world. They're not nice people. They're not nice people either. How long,
Well, that's how we got electricity. That's exactly how we got electricity. It was Edison with his direct current, and the Tesla type of guys with the alternating current. And then what happened was,
Edison tried to muddy up Tesla because he said alternating current was very dangerous, and he used it to electrocute elephants and stuff, and he created the electric chair.
they actually did the electric chair, and it backfired on them.
It backfired.
And that's how we got alternating current over direct current, and then it also went over longer lines. But yeah, I mean, there just needs to be somebody willing to step up and get involved and the technology. There's companies right now that are using centrifuges. They've got them in the desert, and they've got these big things that look like a drum with a big pipe sticking out of them. And what they do is they accelerate this to such a high velocity, and then they launch a projectile that goes at hypersonic speed at first. And then when it reaches its apogee, it then sheds the sable or whatever, and then it launches rockets.
Yes.
Now the problem is a human will not be able to go into something like that
Nope.
because it has tremendous G forces.
But what's to prevent you from launching oxygen, water, compressed foodstuffs, compressed energy sources up into space, into orbit up there, and then sending people up there to build a space station for which you have sufficient supplies? I talk about that in my book, Monkeys in Space. I got an idea from it for the old silent movie where they had a giant cannon and they put people
From the Earth to the moon.
From the Earth to the moon.
That's correct.
Well, there are ways. You have the rail gun, which is electromagnetic. It propels a usually depleted uranium rod that's covered in a ferrous metal at super hypersonic speeds using magnetism. All right. And so what's to prevent that from launching things into space? It's just a matter of scale. And where do we launch things now? And I don't understand why we launch from sea level. And maybe someone smarter than me could call up and say, hey, this is why we launch from sea level. Don't you think the higher you get up, the less energy you would have to take to get into that orbit? So if you get up on a high mountain and then you're already closer to the top of the atmosphere, the air's thinner, there's less resistance, all that stuff.
I think though the thing is with that, it's the ionosphere and how they have to power down the rockets when they go through maximum Q velocity, and then because the maximum dynamic pressure, it's going to be the same no matter what because it's at the same level. Because usually in a rocket launch, it's about a minute 30 into there where they have to power down because it reaches the maximum dynamic pressure. So even if you launched it from, say, a 35,000 foot mountain, you're not really going to save that much. You're only going to save like 12 seconds before it goes to maximum dynamic pressure. But you might get 12 seconds more of the lift, but I don't know, because after a while, the rocket has to go sideways to get into orbit. It doesn't just go straight up. It has to go sideways to get into orbit. So it's the same thing no matter what, and it might actually be further. I don't know. But there's probably some scientific reason for that. I mean, they were talking years ago about the space elevator, where you have something circling the Earth, and then you just have something as thin as a hair, a wire, and then you take an elevator up to it, and then you don't even have to expend any fuel. The elevator goes straight up, and then you could build a space station that way, or transport people to spaceships up there. So I mean, there's all kinds there, but the problem is if that wire falls down, even though it's so thin, it had destroyed buildings and everything because of the velocity of it. So I mean, there's been all kinds of theories on that for years.
Well, okay, so one thing you have to do is you would have to have a space station up there for the elevator, because you have to have something large enough that the gravitational pull of the moon, all right, is working against the gravitational pull of the Earth. So you're kind of like in that free fall status. You're between the moon and the Earth. Then you lower a cable down, and you have to have anything that you bring up, you're again fighting the gravity of the Earth. So from time to time, you're going to have that. Anytime you pull something up, you're pulling a little bit down. But it's a matter of proportionality. So if the elevator is 1/100,000th of the weight of whatever's up there, then it's only moving it 1/100,000th of that distance. Right? It's a proportionality thing, right? So it would need to be of enough mass to have enough of the moon to pull against it, where it's not getting pulled down to the Earth. And that, yeah, you can constantly, you're only pulling up a little at a time, and it's only going to take a little bit of energy to keep pushing, a little bit of rocket thrust to keep pushing that station back up into higher orbit. But every time you pull something up there, you're pulling that station a little bit down.
Right.
It's like, I should have studied more physics. So one thing, you were talking about Tesla, and okay, so he had come up with alternating current, but on top of that, he came out with a wireless transmission system for electricity. So you didn't even need wires. He converted it to radio waves, and then you have a thing called the Tesla battery. Not the lithium batteries that go into a Tesla car. These are radio receivers that convert radio waves into a charge, which is what you get in an AM radio. When you have the old crystal AM radios, and I'm dating myself there. I don't think any kid knows about this, but the crystal. How many?
I just bought 2 crystal radios at Menards. I give one as a gift, and I'm going to build the other one. So
how many batteries are in a crystal radio?
0.
Where does it get the charge from to power the earphone?
The signal from the radio station.
That's right. The signal converts from a radio wave to a charge, which powers the earphone, which, very light charge. But you put enough of these together, or you make the antenna big enough, and you convert that charge into more useful energy. And you can charge your cell phone on these Tesla batteries. It's really a simple design. Put enough of them together to get the 5 volts to charge your phone. But Westinghouse had already invested in transmission lines to transmit this energy. Plus, that way he have control. He could meter it and charge people for it. If you're sending this stuff up through the airways, anyone could pull it down. All you need is to make a Tesla battery of your own, and you're going to pull it down. It's like when you remember the radio stations would have on like Memorial Day, Labor Day, and on New Year's Eve, they would run the top 500 rock and roll songs of all time. And
I remember that fondly.
Everyone had 8 tracks or had reel-to-reels or would quickly switch the cassette tapes, right? So you would have this coming, and the record companies are like, hold on a second, all right? That's copyrighted material. And the Supreme Court said, if it's over the public airways, it's free. You just can't sell it. I can't resell it, right? But I could tape record it for myself, right?
Right.
I could VHS tape, a movie on WGN. I just can't convert that to a tape and start, duplicate tapes and start selling them.
Or charge people to watch it.
So Westinghouse was there and saying, hey, he was making money off of it. But he really, he took advantage of Tesla died dirt poor, right? These were all his ideas. And he died dirt poor. Why? Because he didn't care. He didn't care about money. He had these great thoughts. He wrote them down, and it gave him the joy to have them produced and working, right? But they quashed a lot of his ideas because, hey, if you set up one of these transmission stations on a hydroelectric dam, and you're making gravity and the earth energy and everything, is making all this electricity, and all you got to do is maintain this dam, right? And it's going out there for free. You don't have to maintain transmission lines. Who's making money off that? You know?
Nobody.
Yeah. So, but Tesla was looking at, so you kind of.
Tesla is trying to better humanity, and that's where it goes into conflict with the people that are trying to better themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is where it gets difficult. I think at some point, you know, Elon Musk never missed a meal.
Struggling to pay rent or utility bills.
All right? And we going. Elon Musk never missed a meal, right? He never suffered out in the cold, all right? He never worried about paying his rent. Neither did Donald Trump. Neither did a lot of these people. They've never worried about that, right? They're kind of entitled and they have egos, right? Reagan said, you know, a rising tide floats all boats.
All ships, yeah.
Okay, we're going to try for another caller.
Hello?
Hello.
There we go.
Who do we have calling in here?
We got Harry Cooper here.
Harry, what's up?
Rising prices, gasoline prices, they're all up. No, actually, they're coming down under Donald Trump.
Okay, we're not political here.
Larry called and said that you're going to talk about U-505 today, since it was the 81st anniversary of its capture a couple of days ago. And
well, Larry might have been a bit mistaken there, because I'm not prepared to talk about the U-505.
okay.
We're talking about SpaceX, NASA, and Space Force. We haven't gotten into Space Force much, though.
Oh, okay. Our only thought on that, and then I won't clog up any more of your airtime. But one of our members, who's now deceased, was a 35-year senior engineer with NASA, and he started telling things he shouldn't be telling, and he got fired with no pension after 35 years. And his Social Security disappeared, and he died penniless in an assisted living place. But he gave me all his data, and holy smokers, we put it together in a book called Space, the Final Frontier, Secrets NASA Doesn't Want You to Know.
Okay, is that available on your website?
Yes, sir, it is.
So give us the website.
Sharkhunters.com.
Sharkhunters.com. You hear that? So secrets that NASA does not want you to know. I'm going to look that one up, probably buy a copy, because that's interesting to me. I'll get a kick out of it.
Oh, yeah, and everybody knows about Roswell. Roswell was not the first one of those crashes. He's been to several of them before Roswell. And also, if you've heard of the Kecksburg egg, which is very, very spooky. He was one of the two guys NASA sent up to Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, to supervise the loading of this thing onto Army trucks. And where is it now? We think it's in the same warehouse where Indiana Jones's lost Ark of the Covenant is stored. And there is such a place 3 or 4 levels down underneath Wright Pat Air Force Base.
Okay. All right, so yeah, we're talking about we got into Tesla here, and I think when you get to Tesla and Elon Musk, again, he has a fiduciary responsibility, all right, because he had drawn out, he had taken money from the public, capital. Now, if he did it with his own capital, it doesn't matter what he would do, right? So he might want to do something for the betterment of humanity, or just for himself, right? Maybe some guy wants to live on a space station. He's got billions of dollars to spend. Well, he doesn't have to worry about the government telling him how to spend it, and he doesn't have to worry, he's got the money to spend until he runs out of money, right?
And with $440 billion, it'll take a long time to run out of money.
Well, the thing is, that's money. That's what he's worth. That's not what he has in liquid assets.
Right.
I think the guy does.
He's got more in the bank than you and I have.
Maybe some of these guys don't have any liquid assets.
Oh,
they're like they got to convert everything all the time.
Yeah, could be.
What's that? Marla's my fiduciary expert.
Go ahead.
No, I said they have loans.
Yeah, they borrow money from their own companies.
Right, they're
Okay.
leveraged. They're leveraged, and at the end they might have some money, but that requires you always to put it on the market, and then who knows what it'll
You
bring.
could win big, but you could also lose it all
Yep.
Yeah, so
Ouch.
quickly.
so in my book, the Monkeys in Space book, which is purely fictional, one of my characters is trillions of dollars because he's existed for like 2 million years, but he's just a pre-hominid. He's an Australopithecus that can speak.
Okay.
But he's immortal, and he has very little ego, and he decides that he wants to go into space, and he's invested. He's got corporations, but he's not. He owns it all. None of his stuff is in stock. There's no stock in his companies. He owns everything flat out. So when he goes to space, he develops stuff like, okay, so what are we going to need? His company does this because he's got a brain trust. What do you need? He goes, well, you need air, right? You need to recycle air. And they say, well, how do we do that? Well, we could clean it with all this equipment, or we could have plants. Plants will clean the air and convert carbon dioxide into
oxygen. Sure.
All right, so then he works on that because you got to be able to grow it in space. What's going to be the best thing in space and everything, but in the process of developing these processes, he's also developing products for humanity. Right.
Okay.
So he's making a lot of food products because he doesn't need them for space yet. So rather than just burn it off or put it in he's selling it to people, right? People are buying it. He's making shelf-stable food. He's selling it. He's making carbon fiber building blocks, which he's also selling, right? So everything that he's making to go into space has a commercial use that he's able to sell. So he's actually making more money with his commercial ventures, but that's because he has no ego and he's not really greedy. He has one mission. He wants to get off the earth because he feels that he's in danger if he stays on the earth. So everything, and he's 2 million years old, so he's not like we need to do it tomorrow.
No,
he's
not tomorrow.
It'll take time, and he understands those things. I'm not saying we need a 2 million year old person there, or we need a person with no ego. Okay, when we come back, we'll talk about the type of person you need to actually get into space and colonize it. Today we went noon to 2. This is going to be the last quarter of the show. We're on WRMN 1410 AM. If you're listening, you know that because you got us in on the radio. If you don't have a dial on your radio, I'm telling you where the dial's at. It's at 1410. All right. Fox River Valley Media Network, streaming on WRMN1410.com, and it comes in real nice. I listened to it on the way in on my phone. It comes in very nice. Our studio number here is 847-931-1410. Our text is 505-926-1410. And you could hit us up in the comments on the Facebook Live channel on the WRMN 1410's Facebook Live. If you are a current member of Space Force, a veteran of Space Force, a former or current employee of NASA, or a former or current employee of SpaceX, call in, discuss it with us. Be polite. No one's going to be mean to you. All right, I'm not. Be polite and you're good. We got a caller here.
Oh no, he dropped.
Larry dropped. All right, Larry, if you get a chance, call back in. Sorry,
Mike, we also did an AI search during the break. And it says the average annual salary at SpaceX is around $128,000.
That's considerably higher than the average salary of your U.S. Army enlisted man.
It could be as low as 45 to 50 for the assemblers, but as high as 177,000 for programmers or software engineers.
All right, so we got Larry on now.
Oh, nope, it's Dennis.
Dennis, hi, Dennis.
Yeah, interesting show, guys. I'm an ex-employee, but not any of those companies. Okay, I just have a couple things to say.
Okay.
Yeah, all the way from the beginning of the show, and you know, I'm a faithful listener, and I'm going to
Yes.
make a comment. But you're talking about the airlines. You know, I worked with the airlines, I don't know, since the early 70s, 73, 74. And you know, they're a different breed of cat. They're mixed government because they're subsidized. You know, all these smaller cities, the U.S. government, it was, you know, an edict, a demand, whatever, that the airlines had to have service, you know, to those cities. And the regional airlines at the time, because they were all regional, other than when you got into TWA, AA, and UA, you know, they had to provide service. Well, they weren't making any money on that service, so they were subsidized. Just want to make that comment. Talked about the electric chair. I knew a guy that was sentenced to an electric chair.
Yeah,
They
okay.
didn't give it to him because he didn't want it, and that's the way it happened in Ohio. But I'm listening to the show. I got other comments. I'll say them for another day, but I'm going to say always find your show interesting.
Thank you, Dennis. It means a lot.
Thanks, Dennis.
Okay.
All right. So, all right. So, going with that. So, if you're working, one of the things, and this is probably going to happen with Space Force and SpaceX. I'm sure SpaceX is going to benefit for it. In the military, we have classified, one of the biggest jobs that they have trouble keeping people in is, they call it a 35 Tango. And he is a classified system repairman. So you have classified systems, proprietary motherboards, everything else. And you have to have the training to do this, and you have to have the clearance, the access. So a top secret, usually caveated. And it takes about a year to go through all this training, and then you have 2 to 3 years left in the Army. And then when you get out, rather than take a promotion or stay in or re-enlist, even with a large enlistment bonus, these contracting companies like Raytheon,
Martin Marietta.
Martin Marietta, Lockheed, Boeing, all these companies, they're hiring you at 4 times what you made from the Army. And why are you going to re-enlist when you could be a civilian and work for these guys? Then you come back as a contractor the Army's paying 5 times what they would pay you to hire the contractor, because the contracting company's got to make its money. You're making 4 times than you made before. It's a little strange with that. So I could see the same thing happening with the Space Force guys, because they're going to require a lot of technical training, tracking satellites. They also do cybersecurity. They're going to get cybersecurity training out of the Army. They don't, out of the Space Force. Space Force will train these guys to do it. And then they'll be done with their first term of service, and they'll have all the training, they'll have the clearance, and then someone like SpaceX will hire them out, or Martin Marietta, or Raytheon, or any of these guys will hire them out and then return them back to Space Force as civilian contractors, making even more money. There is one of the problems the military overall hasn't solved. How they can consistently recruit and retain trained soldiers to maintain a professional defense force without having to go through contractors, which are a lot more expensive. They say it's fiscally better, but it isn't. It isn't. You have more control over an enlisted guy, or a guy that's under contract to you, than you do hiring a contractor that sends you some whatever guy that just, again, they ask for a capability. They say, we need a guy that was 35 Tango trained with the top secret clearance. And they give you a guy that's 35 Tango trained with a top secret clearance that weighs 450 pounds now. All right. He's 3 foot tall, and you know, he needs constant medical treatment. They gave you the capability you asked for. And then you're like, oh, well, that's kind of being, that's hyperbole on that. But I've seen a lot of guys that the reason they're no longer in the military is because the military wasn't suited for them. But they still want to do that job. So without having, what am I saying? Is that there's no SpaceX academy, is there?
No,
I don't know.
No.
it's on the job training, I would think.
It's on the job training or to get them out of college. And I'll tell you something. A lot of times, you don't need these college degrees. That's, that's Wizard of Oz stuff, right? The Scarecrow thought he was stupid because, he didn't have anything. And the wizard gives him his college diploma. Says, see, now you're smart. But in the actual book, the Scarecrow thought he was stupid, but he was actually a smart guy, right? Just like the lion thought he was cowardly, but he was actually a brave guy. And the Tin Man thought he didn't have a heart, but he actually had a lot of feelings, So there are people that can do the job, but they don't have the credentials to, quote, prove they can do the job. And there's a lot of people that have credentials that prove they can do the job, but then they can't do the job. But I've seen with the Doge stuff, right, that he just brought in these guys that were like, they're autistic savants with the numbers. And they go through the numbers and they're like, man, this is all off. And here's where the waste was. So he, as a private person, is able to hire the way he wants. But if he's in a corporation and they have the hierarchy, all of a sudden you're going to have an HR that's going to require certain things. And then once they hire him, it's hard to get rid of them. So the best way to do is already get a guy that's already been trained by the military and bring him in because he's got that military discipline. He's got the training. He's got something, and you can count on it. So, but that's what I was thinking of. Until people can actually hold something, taste something, or wear something that these space companies have provided, they're not going to care. Without enough people caring, enough serious people caring that vote, the politicians aren't going to care either because they don't vote. They don't keep them in place. They're not going to vote to fund this stuff because people really don't care. They're like, what have you done for me lately? Back during the space race with the President Kennedy and the Russians, there was a big nationalism. There was a big national pride thing going there, right? And what sort of national pride did we have in the last 4 years? Well, the last year that the astronauts from Boeing set up, well, they were astronauts, but Boeing had sent up a ship they sent up an unmanned ship to recover them. And then it didn't make it because the leaks and everything. And that's when Elon Musk had to come up and recover these guys that had been on the space station too long. So there was like no national pride to come bring them down. And we have a problem with the Russians. We have embargoes on the Russians, so the Russians are like, fine, you're going to embargo us, you can't use our spacecraft anymore. And they're the only ones running the thing up and down, right, at that time. Now you got Elon Musk with his thing, so that kind of takes the Russians out of the picture. But is he going to have so much ego that he's going to put us behind the Russians?
Well, I found something in preparing for the show that turned up on June the 4th. The Chinese now have made their first soft landing with a reusable booster. So, I'm wondering where that technology came from.
I know exactly where it came from.
I bet you do.
Elon Musk, you know what? Here's another thing, right? You have industrial espionage, right? Right. Now you have counterintelligence, right? So the only thing a counterintelligence guy does for you in the industry, right? It keeps the enemy or your competitor, let's not say enemy, let's say competitors. It keeps your competitors from getting your proprietary stuff, right? You're supposed to be making sure that your people aren't leaking it, that the competitor's not getting it, and there's supposed to be some legal ramifications if they do get it, that you could sue them because that's your proprietary, you can prove it. But when it comes international like that, and on a level of countries like China, Russia, United States, right? So I think the only ones that would care about that would be us, right? So if Elon, because that's his that's not U.S. property, that's SpaceX proprietary. Right? So he could probably prove easily that the Chinese went in and with industrial espionage took that from him, right? And now he's going to sue an international court. What are the Chinese going to say?
They don't have to pay.
Yeah,
They
who
develop
cares?
it
So what?
themselves.
Yeah, we don't care. We're not giving you anything. We don't care. Now, if the Chinese, if we had people over there stealing information from the Chinese, and we suddenly build a duplicate of whatever the Chinese were building, right? And they do their thing, and they go to the international courts, and they go, oh, the United States stole it from us. What are we likely to do?
Pay them.
Pay them. Yeah. Same thing with the Russians. Are the Russians going to pay? No.
No way.
Would we pay? Yeah, we would, because we're the good guys. We feel good about it. But listen, that's what industrial espionage is about. You know, so when the Chinese did that, that shows you one thing that Elon's not spending his money on. Counter-industrial espionage. Because that's proprietary to him. The U.S. government has no obligation to defend his proprietary information. Right? That's like, you know, I make $1 million. I don't put it in the bank. I convert it to gold, and I put it in my house, and I tell the U.S. government, I says, I want a 24-hour police protection on the $1 million of gold in my house, which I don't have, so don't come to my house. I ain't got that. I ain't got that much. Not even close. No way. Right? Are they going to give it to me? No. Put it in a bank. All right? Put it somewhere. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, then tough. So should a guy, because he's that important, so if you had that much hubris that you feel you're that important, that you're deserving, that you're entitled to that because of what you're doing, then, you know, you should pay for it. You really, you know. But if you're going to take that and say, I can make these rockets cheaper because I'm not paying for counter-industrial espionage, so I could just wipe that line item out of my budget. Boop, don't need to spend that money. Look, my stuff's cheaper. So when the Chinese steal it and now they're in direct competition with me, and they never paid for a dime of that development, except for they paid to steal it, you know, they're going to bribe people, all that stuff. Whose fault is it?
Ours.
It's the guy that owned the proprietary information for not protecting it.
Yeah.
Now, as a government, right, as defense, Department of Defense and everything, there's a point where you need to tell these contractors, listen, you do not have the standard of counterintelligence that we want. You don't have the standard of security that we want, right? You should have that because it could go bad because we don't want this getting out, all right? Now, if you sell it to us and it's no longer proprietary and it's our information, we will protect it. But that's not what they do. They hold on. This is a big thing now, right? Back in the day, the 1911 45, proprietary by Colt, right? But like everyone's cloning it now, everyone did it on license. We did it on license, but the technology was out in the open. Everyone could duplicate it. It's just Browning high standard, you know, Browning high power.
John Browning.
Yeah.
John Browning.
So, but when you get to the real technical itty bitty stuff, you know, the programming, the microprocessors, everything that goes along with this, it's mostly the landing of that stuff. The landing of that's all programming. You know, the guys that make the robots that can walk, right? Robots, they program them to walk. How much time do you think it took for a programmer to sit there to type in the code to make this thing balance and walk? We do it naturally. We've been doing it since a child. Our brain does it automatically. You know, you don't even think about it. You just move. But a robot's got to think about walking all the time. Doesn't do it automatically. It's got to hit that sub-program that says, I'm going to move this foot here, I'm going to move that, then I'm going to move that foot, I'm going to balance this, I got to switch the balance there, I got to be, you know, have the gyroscopes and everything. That takes a lot of programming. That's a lot of man hours. You don't, you know, like you said, the programmers are making $140,000 a year. Maybe $170,000 a year. They're programming that. If you don't have to pay $170,000 because you just stole the program, you just okay, to get really all right. So if you are subcontracting, all right, if you're offshoring some of your technology to China, China puts back doors into all this technology. They put chips where they could access your stuff whenever they want. Whenever that stuff hits the internet, they can access it. They can access what's happening and everything. So if you program something, if they send you a processor, right, and you program that processor, put the programming on it, they got a back door where they can download that process. When it hits the internet, they could target and unload the code that you spent millions of dollars developing that code, and they just stole it because you paid 50 cents less for that processing card because it was made in China. And you don't know everything that's in that processor. You haven't reverse engineered it because it's proprietary to China, and they say if you reverse engineer it, you're violating their contract and we're going to charge you. Am I getting too whack on this?
No.
So
I was just thinking about something. One of the last things I did when I was working is I got to go to the Federal Reserve, and they showed us things about money and stuff like that. And then there was a story about there was an American bill, and I believe it was $100 bill, and it was being peddled in the Far East and on the West Coast and stuff like that. And the problem is the bill was better than the one we made. And they figured out that they thought it was coming from North Korea. So they had to institute a change in the bill. That's when they put the hard piece in there and the color shifting ink and the strip. And they knew that it was counterfeit because the bill we were producing had an open door on the back of a building. But the guy that forged it couldn't take that. He closed the door. And so anyone that had the closed door, they knew was bad, but they looked better than our bills. So, things happen.
yeah, but this is targeted stuff, all right? This is targeted. The Chinese are not stupid, all right? They're in competition with us all the time. Not so much militarily, although there is a little bit of there are competitors there, but economically and production. All right. So where was the VCR invented?
In the U.S.
In the U.S. Who made it famous and who made a fortune off of it?
The Chinese.
The Japanese. Well, first the Japanese, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with cassette tapes, all this stuff. Okay, so what's the big screech now is that they're cutting off foreigners from going to universities, right? Foreign students. One of the things was Chairman Xi's daughter, right? Or one of these high-ranking Chinese officials was going to one of our universities, right? And she was participating. She was, her father or whatever should have punched her in the head. Not that I advocate violence against women or anyone that mentioned, but it's just a figure of speech in that she was doing some anti-American demonstrations, which put her under the limelight, and of course, bam, she's gone. Right? Well,
Out of here.
how many people go, well, where are you planning to go to school? Well, the University of Tokyo. They don't. They're going to MIT. They're going to IIT. They're going to Champaign-Urbana. They're going to universities in California, technological universities in the United States, for which we have endowments, for which the government pays money. They research this stuff. They develop new technologies, which are immediately stolen by our competitors. They don't have to pay for the research and development. That's why they can make things cheaper. So everything's a profit there for them. You need to pay off your research and development first before you make a profit. And so, Marla, what are your thoughts?
I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree with you.
We've got like
But
three.
you're right, it's simple. One guy pays for the research and then someone else copies.
Yeah.
Copyright only lasts so long, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you got to keep paying for some certain copyrights and stuff. That's why, our Legion.
The other thing that Marla is very familiar with, though,
Reinvent.
and also the businesses have to comply with ethics themselves. They have to, and ethically they have to produce it, but ethically they also have to preserve it and protect it.
Yes. So it's like intelligence sharing. And whenever we get something from one of our allies, right? We share like intelligence with them. We have to protect it to the same level they would protect it. All right. So if they give us their TS stuff, we have to treat it like it's our TS stuff, right? So if a company, like I said, SpaceX does something with NASA and it's proprietary to SpaceX, NASA has to protect it as if, with SpaceX, which obviously SpaceX hasn't done. But